Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. Well, here we are. We're right on the verge of Preterist Pilgrim Weekend 2020. I don't want you to forget what a fantastic lineup we have. Our theme is the book of Revelation. All you have to do is go to YouTube. On the search bar, just type in Preterist Pilgrim Weekend 2020. You have night one, you have day two, and you'll have day three. All right? And again, it's all free of charge. We welcome any contributions, any gifts to help us defray the cost that we will have anyway. But nonetheless, it is free of charge for those who simply cannot afford it. Well, all right. We are continuing our examination of the arguments that are based upon the false assumption that the apostles were confused when they linked the fall of Jerusalem with the so-called end of the Christian age, the end of time, and the coming of Christ as a 5'5" Jewish man. Now, remember, brand new book introduced at Preterist Pilgrim Weekend 2020. All right, very special price for the entire month of July. You don't want to fail to take advantage of this. I have to tell you, I am super excited about this book. You know, as early in my ministry, early in my life, I took it for granted the apostles were confused in Matthew 24:3 when they asked their questions. I never questioned, and that was the problem. I never questioned whether or not they were confused or ignorant or just, whatever. I just took it for granted. That's what I'd always heard. That's what was in all the commentaries. And then all of a sudden, I began to really do my own study, and I began to ask, where does it say the apostles were confused? Where? Nowhere. That's the answer. There's not another book like this. I've looked and I've looked. Obviously, I could have missed something. But I want to tell you, I'm not aware of any other book like this anywhere. Great introductory price, so take advantage. All right. Well, we are continuing our discussion of Matthew 24:36 and following, which is supposedly talking about the final coming of the Lord at the supposed end of time, the end of the current Christian age, which, by the way, has no end. Has it ever struck you as extremely odd and problematic that we're supposed to believe that the disciples were talking about the end of the Christian age when the Christian age, the New Covenant age, the age of the Messiah and the New Covenant, has no end? Period. No end. It's eternal, without end. So, how would the disciples be asking about the end of that which in their own theology, in their own Old Covenant passages of Scripture, teach that the age of Messiah would never end? Hello? That's a problem. So anyway, we look at Matthew chapter 24, and we are told, and I want to read this here, that as the days of Noah were, so also shall be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating, they were drinking, marrying and giving marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark. Notice, those days versus that day. Those days, that day. So there's no contrast here. Those days leads up to that day. Now watch. And they did not know until the flood came and took them all away. Oh, okay, no, wait a minute. We are told by those who divide the Olivet Discourse. Well, see, that's what it's going to be like before the coming of the Lord. People are going to be going about their business. They're going to be marrying. They're going to be giving in marriage. They're going to be eating. They're going to be drinking. In other words, just normal life. Now, that supposedly stands in stark contrast to the generation of the first century prior to the fall of Jerusalem. Well, it kind of makes you wonder, since there's supposedly such a stark contrast between pre-AD 70 and pre-final coming of the Lord. And pre-final coming of the Lord, they're eating, drinking, marrying, giving, marriage. In other words, going about business. And kind of makes you wonder, okay, so in the days leading up to the Lord's coming in AD 70, were they marrying and giving in marriage? Were they not still marrying? Well, according to Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, they were. You know, it's better to marry than to burn, Paul said. And so we know for a fact that with apostolic, divine, inspired approval, in the time leading up to the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, on the Lord's coming at that event, people were, guess what? Marrying and giving in marriage. Oh, and by the way, according to Romans 14, 1 Corinthians 8, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, they were also eating and drinking. Now, there were controversies about Jew and Gentile, clean and unclean, but that's all beside the point. Guess what? They were eating and drinking. As in regular life practices. I mean, after all, they couldn't stop eating and drinking for 40 years, could they? I'm not trying to be facetious. But if you're going to draw a contrast between the days prior to the fall of Jerusalem versus those days prior to the coming of the Son of Man and say, see, you have regular life being carried on, life as normal versus life as not normal. And the life as normal that is being described is eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage. Then there's got to be a contrast with the other, which means, theoretically at least, no marrying, no giving in marriage, no eating and drinking. But they were pretty clearly eating and drinking. They were pretty clearly marrying and giving in marriage prior to AD 70. But here's the real issue. Jesus said they knew not. Now notice the they knew not. Who is the they that did not know? Well, it obviously wasn't Noah and his family who were saying, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, and it's coming in this generation. So all of these people who had heard Noah preaching, saying, it's coming in this generation. Hey, did they not know? Oh, wait a minute. Had they heard? Well, let's see. Paul, in Romans chapter 10, talked about Israel of his day. Israel of his day that was rejecting the gospel, which included at that time the message of imminent, impending destruction and judgment on the Jews. They heard that message throughout the world. Did they not know it was coming? Therefore? Well, you see, they knew, but they didn't know. They knew, I've heard one of those crazy preachers, Christian guys saying judgment's coming, Lord's coming in this generation. Yeah, right, sure. Where's the promise of his coming? But they did not know it. They knew it intellectually because they heard the preaching, because Paul said, have they not heard? And his answer was, yes, verily, their sound is gone out into all of the world. In other words, the message of that impending judgment had gone out into all of the world. Have they not known? Well, intellectually they knew. They did not accept. And because they did not accept, they did not know. Knowing in the sense of, oh my goodness, I've got to prepare. I've got to obey. Listen, there's a huge difference between knowing and knowing. When I would sit in math class, when I was in high school, and especially algebra, oh my God. Look, I got to tell you, math and I don't get along. I tell people somewhat facetiously these days, math and I don't get along to such an extent that if you get beyond anything, beyond 2 plus 2 equals 5, I'm lost. Okay? I'm just lost. But every once in a blue moon, and he was a good teacher, all right. Every once in a while, I mean, the teacher would go, everybody get this, everybody get this, and everybody's raising their hands, yeah, and I'm sitting there like, and once in a while, he would stop and he'd say, Don, do you get this? And I said, no. Now, I saw what he said, or heard what he said. I even saw it on the whiteboard, or blackboard. Not whiteboard, that was before whiteboards. So I saw it, I heard it, I knew it, but I had no idea what he was talking about. Had a mental block. But every once in a blue moon, he would go through it, and he said, Don, do you see this? And all of a sudden I go, I do. I see it. I get that. The difference between knowing and knowing. So did the people of Noah's day know that a flood was coming? Well, they knew it had been preached for an awful long time. They knew that intellectually, but they did not believe it. And because they did not believe it, they did not act on it. You know, look, you may have something that you call faith, but if you do not act on that faith, then you do not have biblical faith. That's just all there is to it. So they knew, but they did not act. And because they did not act upon what they intellectually knew, they were taken away. And we'll have more on that at another time as we continue our discussion, because, you see, we have this same imagery by Paul in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. In the meantime, don't forget, Preterist Pilgrim Weekend starts as in tomorrow, if my internal calendar is correct. Be sure to watch. Be sure to take advantage of the fantastic book deals that we are offering on the virtual book table. All right, thank you so much. I will see you on the flip side.